Okay, how's everybody doing today? You're watching Slot Car Mayhem. I'm John, and this is episode 27 of the Glendale 65. And today will be part 2 of the pit lane retaining wall, the test piece. And like I said, this is part 2, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to get this thing painted. What I'm going to be using mostly for the paints are just regular craft acrylic paints. And I have one which is just a normal gray, which is very, very close to the color of the primer I'm using. The second color I'm going to be using is actually referred to as linen, and it's a little bit of a darker brown, actually, that you can see, and we're going to use that very sparingly just to make sure we get a little bit of contrast on there. Then once that is on, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to fog it over with a little bit of fog gray to lighten it up. And since this is going to be outdoor concrete, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use another craft paint called Vanilla to go ahead and to brighten it up and give it more of an outdoor bleached look. So I've already applied the initial base on here, and let me see if I can give you an idea of what it looks like. You can see it's very streaky and very spotty, which is exactly what we're going for here. I'm trying to see if I can get it in here so you can actually see what's happening. There you go. You can see it a little bit. A little bit of in and out, just like so. And what I'm doing is I'm taking my airbrush, in my case it's a dual action Iwata, and running the paint thinned out relatively well with a very low pressure setting, and I'm just coming in and barely pulling the trigger to get some paint to come out, and then I would just go back and forth in this direction and get a little zigzaggy stuff going on there and get some streaks. And that's kind of what we're after with this color. And that's pretty much how we're going to paint the entire project, is in these little strips and streaks like this, until we go ahead and do a fog over to blend everything together. The key is to allow, every time you put paint on, to allow what's previously there to show through. And that's what we're trying to do. And this will give us a nice, uneven, realistic kind of concrete look. Okay. Let's go ahead and talk about direction for a minute. And I'm going to set this down so I don't step on it. And in most cases, when you look at the wall, if you can see our joints here, if you look at the wall, it's going to be sitting in a position like this, which would be vertical. The way we want to paint something like this is relative to how rain would hit it. So in this case, the rain's going to come straight down, and it's going to run down pretty much parallel to the joints. And that's the direction that we want to paint these things in, because that's what we're trying to do, is to emulate rain staining and weathering these retaining walls, much like you would see in the real world. That being said, let's assume for a minute that your retaining wall was on an incline. If that's the case, if you look at your joints are still going to follow the top line of the panel, because these are precast sections, and nobody is going to sit there and precast these things with angled cuts to give you nice vertical joints here. They're going to be jointed perpendicular to the top edge, much like you would find. That being said, rain would come down vertically in relation to the joist, so actually your angle would be this way instead of parallel with the joints. It would be at an angle vertical when the wall is in its position, and that angle would change on either side of the wall. So when you're doing your painting, please keep in mind that you got to understand the direction that you're going to need to go when you're doing your painting to make sure we've got streaks that are going to result in a vertical pattern, regardless if the wall is straight up and down or inclined. Either way, we've got to make sure we've got vertical, and that's what we're trying to do here. So now that I've got this first coat in on here, and I believe, again, you can see that. If we look nice and close, you can see some of the streaking effect. Then we're going to go ahead, and my next coat's actually going to be this linen, which is actually a darker brown. And I'm not going to do much. I'm going to do probably a little bit in the middle, again going up and down, up and down, up and down here in the middle, and maybe a little bit every now and then near the bottom of the wall. And that's it. And this is just to provide a little bit of contrast to color And when we start putting our other colors on, it'll tie everything in together. So I'm going to take this over to the airbrush booth and I'm going to start painting this color and we'll see what we have. Okay, I went ahead and I've thrown on a little bit of the linen color. And it's not much, just a little bit near the middle of the panel coming down. And that's really all we have, but you can see it provides a little bit of color and contrast to what's actually going on. Take a look at the other side and you can see, and there you go. You can see we got a little bit of character being built into it here, and we're going to proceed and continue and with the fog gray that we have here. Now how I'm going to do this color here is I'm actually going to do it twice. I'm going to go up and down like you would expect first, very lightly. Then, after that's done, I'm going to very lightly fog over the entire piece, and that will tie the colors together and start blending them in together into a semi-consistent color, but they'll have the same contrast and the same kind of look. So it'll tie everything together real nice, and once that's done, then we'll go ahead and move on to the vanilla. So let me take this into the booth, we'll spray the fog gray twice, and we'll see what we have. Okay, we're back, and I have done one striped application of the fog gray, and I've done a light overcoat. Same thing with the fog gray. And you can see what we've got going on now. We're starting to get a little bit more of a subtle, uniform look, and it's I wish you could see this in real life. It's really starting to look pretty good. Now, if I was doing indoor concrete, I would probably follow up with a second fog coat of the fog gray and proceed to the next steps outside of the airbrushing. But in this case, this is going to be outdoor concrete, so now I'm going to switch to the vanilla, and I'm going to follow that same process. I'll go ahead and I'll do some vertical stripage just to help tiger stripe it a little bit more. Just a little bit, not a whole lot, and then I'll probably put two applications, very, very light, very translucent, of the vanilla over the entire thing to help brighten the color a little bit, blend everything together a little bit more, and to give us more of a sun bleach type of look. And that'll pretty much wrap up the majority of the painting side of it. So I'll take this back into the airbrush booth, and I'll go ahead and show you what I'm doing with the vanilla, and we'll take a look at the results when we get finished. Okay, we're back, and I've applied one streak application and a couple of light fog coats of the vanilla. And as you can see, now we have a much more uniform look, but if we get it at just the right angle, I know it's kind of hard to see on the camera, but you can definitely pick up some of the streaking and shading that's still underlying. It's very subdued, and this is a good base for us to go forward and to continue with the subsequent applications of other things we need to accomplish to get the right type of look. I'm trying to see if you can get a good look at the streaking here, and I think we can kind of see some of that there. But the overall look is much more uniform. And like I said, this is a good base to start with here. So now we're ready to continue with the next subsequent steps. And we're done with the airbrush colors at this point. So I'm just going to get those out of the way. Now, we have to make a choice at this point. And at this point, if you like the look that you have, and you're going to go ahead and you're not going to do anything else except go ahead and maybe throw a little chalk on here or something. At this point, you can put a flat clear finish over the top to help protect the underlying paint and to make sure that you don't damage the paint or alter the paint in the subsequent steps. If you are going to maybe do some pin washes in the joints, or if you want to add any decals, you're going to want to use a gloss clear. And that will be my next step, is I will put a gloss clear on here The gloss clear makes it much easier to do the correct pin washes that we need to do for the joints. And if you're going to be applying any decals, sponsor decals or anything like that, particularly water slide decals, the gloss application makes the end result much better. Decals over a flat finish tend to do what's called silvering, where you get micro little bubbles underneath the decal, and the clear backing shows up cloudy under a matte finish. So I would recommend going with a gloss finish if you're going to be doing decals or washes. It makes the application of both, the end result, much better. So I'm going to go ahead and add a gloss clear to this because I will be doing washes to the joint lines to bring them out a little bit. And we'll take it and we'll see what we have from there. And for the gloss clear, I'm going to use just a rattle can and spray a couple of light coats, just enough to give a little shine on it and to make it easier to do the washing, and if you're going to be doing decaling. So we'll get that done, and we'll be back when we're ready to start doing the pin washes. Okay, we're back, and I've, as you can tell, I got a little bit of a sheen on the part here, and I've coated this with a couple light coats of gloss clear. And again, I will emphasize how important it is to use a clear of some sort at this point if you're going to do any sort of weathering. In my case, I'm using gloss clear for now because what we're going to do next is we're going to apply the washes into the joint lines, and the gloss clear makes everything flow much better. That being said, if you're going to be using water slide decals, same thing. You want to make sure you have a gloss clear base before you do your water slide decals. After all of this is done, we can go ahead and we can recoat over it with a flat clear, and we can proceed to the next step. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use my Vallejo, my good old standby Vallejo dark gray wash. And don't be afraid to make your own wash. It's easy to do. A little bit of acrylic paint. Thin it down using, I like to use about 50% water and alcohol mixture, and throw in a couple drops of dishwashing liquid into the mix, and that will act as a surfactant and allow the wash to flow. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and brush right over where our lines are. Now if we look, and if we just touch it, load up our brush and we'll touch it, you can kind of see how it just kind of runs right down the joint line without any issue. And don't be afraid to overpaint the joint. And don't be afraid to use quite a bit. If it drips, it drips. Don't worry about it. We'll clean this up here when it dries. And I'm just going to touch all this up, just like so. I know it's not pretty now, but it'll look a lot better when it dries. So we're going to go ahead and get all this wash into place, and we'll come back when the wash dries, and I'll show you how we remove the excess. Okay, it looks like our wash is dried up pretty good. It usually takes about 20 minutes or so for it to dry on its own. And you can see it looks pretty messy, and what we need to do is clean this up, and that's very, very simple. Now in this case, the Vallejo wash I'm using is actually slightly alcohol based, so I'm going to use some just regular old alcohol, and very lightly, not saturated. We're going to dampen one of the cotton pads with the alcohol. And once we have that, I just kind of fold it up like so. And then what we can do is, you don't want to push real hard, but enough to break the surface of what we're doing. You can see that you can just wipe off the excess. And what it's leaving is, it's leaving just the wash inside the joint line. So that's one of the reasons why we want to use the clear coat, because it makes this process much easier. If this was a flat finish, it would be very, very hard to do it this way and to get a clean removal of your wash. So if you're going to use the pin wash, a gloss coat is really what you want to do. So we're going to go through and we're just going to get our edges taken off and get the excess done, and we'll see what we have when that's completed. Okay, now I've made sure my wash and everything looks really good in my my pin wash here in the joints. Everything looks really good. We can see we got a nice clean look here on our joints. And the next step now is, if I was going to go ahead and do some water slide decals, I would do those now. I'm not doing it on this test piece, of course. So now I'll just simply take this back to the airbrush booth and give it a quick light coat of flat clear, and we'll see what we have after that. Okay, now we've got a nice coat of flat clear on top of this, and you can see it's starting to look pretty good. However, there's one more step we need to do to finalize this, and this is what I refer to as making the magic happen. And for that, we're going to use a series of pastel chalks. And you can get these at Hobby Lobby or Michael's or anywhere, and they're not expensive and they last forever. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a color that's fairly close, maybe a little bit darker, like we have here. I'm going to take a blade and I'm going to scrape just a little bit. Just a few little wisps, don't take much. And then I'm going to take my finger and I'm going to just lightly rub it, paying attention to the direction like we did when we were spraying to help get the streaking effect for rain. And I'm only working with one panel at a time. And I'll go through and I'll do all my other panels the same way. Then you can come back with a little bit of white. And again, not much, just a little bit. And we can do the same thing. And these chalks are really going to help blend things together. And we still got a little bit more work to do on this one. But you can see it's starting to get a really good look here. And we can just go ahead and continue to move things around as we need to and make sure we've got a nice colored finish here. And we can do this in several different types of layers. In this case, I want to lighten it up a little bit, so I'm going to add just a little bit more. And we're going to do the same thing, continue with the chalks, and lighten it up. Just like so. And you don't need a lot of weight on your finger, very, very little. You see it starts to lighten up and it starts to kind of tone all these colors down. And you can do this all day long, actually, and get the look you're kind of after. If you see a spot that looks a little too dark, you can add a little bit of white and help blend that color out. It doesn't take much. Now, since we have the flat clear on here, if you're going through your chalks and you don't like what you're doing, you can just take a damp, very slightly damp rag, and you can just wash the chalk off. And you can go back in and you can add more on top of it. So it's not a big deal. The chalks are very, very forgiving and very, very easy to do. Another thing I do like to do sometimes is use some of this rust color. And I'll do it here just for a quick demo. And I just put one little area of rust right there. And rust always comes down in a vertical direction. So always go ahead and put a little streak down. You can see now, I don't know if you can see it or not, but we're throwing in a little bit of rust color here. And it provides just a little bit of contrast to give you a little bit of color variation there if you feel like you need it. And we're going to go ahead and do that over the whole panel, and we'll see what we come up with when we're done. Okay, and here we are after completing the chalking process. And I generally don't clear coat after the chalking process. I usually just let it sit for a day or two and make sure everything's the way I like it. But I've done all edges. I've done the ends, the top, everything with just a quick application of chalk. And this really doesn't take long. It only takes a couple minutes to do it. But the end result is really phenomenal. If you could see it in person, you'd really appreciate the look overall. And if you feel it, because of the chalk, of course, you've got a slightly rocky kind of texture, and it feels really good. But that's how I do my concrete retaining walls. And again, it doesn't matter if it's foam core or MDF, painting it in this fashion and following it up with the chalks and things like that gives a really good look. And it's definitely weathered. There's no question about that. And if you haven't figured it out, I'm kind of a weathering hound, and I like to see things that are outside in nature weathered a little bit. And again, the chalks are extremely forgiving, so don't be afraid to experiment with your chalks. You can really go for the look you're after. Like right here, it might be stained a little bit, but that'll be okay. That'll be the part that's against the pit lane itself in this case, and I might show a little bit of damage on here. Maybe some tire marks or something where a car bumped the wall, something like that, and it'll tie in just fine. But that's how we're doing this, and this test piece here, like I say, probably won't be on the track other than to show how the final result ends up looking. But what I will do is I'll be moving to my next pit wall, which is actually 78 3/4 inches long, made out of foam core. And these are the exact same steps I'll do to go ahead and get this retaining wall, or the 78-inch one, on the track. And I'll be finishing that pit wall with the same exact method. So we'll wrap this episode up. Again, thank you everybody for watching. Thanks for all the subscriptions and the likes. They do mean a lot to me. And if you guys have any questions, please feel free to hit me up. I hope everybody has a wonderful day and takes care of their families and all that good stuff. And once again, thank you for watching. We'll see you soon.